get out of here with some completed documents. Compassionate Choices is the nation's oldest and largest organization dedicated to increasing care and improving options at the end of life, including medical aid in dying. So what exactly is medical aid in dying? Medical aid in dying gives mentally capable, terminally ill individuals with a prognosis of 6 months or less to live the option to request, obtain, and self-ingest medication to die peacefully in their sleep if their suffering becomes unbearable. Large majorities of Americans believe that a dying person's decision to end their suffering should be based on that person's values in addition to their family and their personal physician. Compassionate Choices encourages everyone to have an advance directive or living will and a medical power of attorney. Other options at the end of life include hospice and palliative care. But these are not always completely sufficient, and that is why we continue advocating for medical aid in dying. Having these options can decrease fear and feelings of powerlessness that we all face at the end with death. So you probably are wondering how I became personally involved with Compassionate Choices. As a primary care physician that practiced in Texas for 35 years, I have witnessed a number of deaths. Some of them were peaceful, many were not. Some of them involved a very slow process and often do, associated with a loss of independence and dignity, and punctuated with pain and suffering. My own grandfather's death always comes to mind. Growing up, I knew him as a strong man who owned a farm. He cut his own cedar, he fed and vaccinated his own cows, and he harvested the corn on his farm. But one day, this man started having low back pain. At first, he thought it was probably due to some boards that he had lifted, and so he waited a little while, but the pain became increasingly worse until he was finally diagnosed with cancer of the spine, which in his case was multiple myeloma. In spite of radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and strong pain medication, he was in constant pain such that he could not even be moved in bed without crying out in pain. It took him about 10 to 12 weeks after his diagnosis before he died. I feel strongly that he would have wished for the option of medical aid in dying. So, are there any safeguards for medical aid in dying? I think that's a really important question, especially since there are a lot of people who are concerned that it is going to be foisted upon the weak and disabled. I'm glad you're concerned about these issues. During its 20 years of existence in Oregon, there has never been a single case of abuse of the law known there as the Death with Dignity Act. Laws in most of the states with medical aid in dying provide the following safeguards: that the person be 18 years or older, that they be certified as having a condition that is incurable and irreversible with less than 6 months to live by 2 independent healthcare providers, that the person be mentally capable to make decisions about his or her own medical care, that the physician has discussed all other options of care with the patient, that the person at the end of life can request a prescription to end his life, both with 2 verbal requests and with a written document witnessed by 2 people. At last, the person must be in no way being coerced to make this request, and that's up to the physician to make certain about that. And finally, that the patient be able to ingest the medication with his own hand. It cannot be given to him by a doctor. It cannot be given to him by his family. He must be able to drink the medication, and he must be the one that decides the time, the place, the where, the when. So this is definitely a patient decision. It's not made by the family or the doctor. This is just a brief summary of some of the mandatory requirements. There are certainly some residency requirements and some other requirements that are included in this law, but these are the main ones. Oregon has had a law of this nature now for 20 years. It has never been changed or expanded. There is no slippery slope. It is a restrictive law and has many safeguards. Texas would most certainly follow suit in this regard when we get legislation ready. So who supports MAID? MAID being medical aid in dying. 73% of the American people agree that when a person is facing a painful terminal disease, it is okay to ask for medical aid in dying. And this comes from a Gallup poll done in May of this year. 59% of Christian Americans and 70% of Americans of other religions agree that this should also be the case. 57% of the doctors are also in accordance with this law that has been enacted in other states. In fact, it has been enacted in 6 other areas, and we have up to 26 other states that are working on laws to this effect. We're hoping that with your support and that of others, that we may have a law available to present to the Texas legislature in 2019. That might be a little optimistic, but we're going to try. Let me mention to you that we do have in your packet, if you've opened that up, if you would. First of all, there's a card that talks about compassion and choices and gives you their website. And I would really encourage you to go to the website. It's easy to volunteer, it's easy to donate, it's easy to send a letter to your representative. In fact, most of those things can be done with the touch of a finger. So it's a really simple, it's made as easy as it possibly can for you, and it's really worth taking the 5 minutes that it takes to go to see Compassion and Choices website. The next thing that you may find in your packet is this is a little fact sheet on compassion and choices and medical aid in dying. So that's something you may want to read over when you get it home. You may want to talk to your neighbors about it, your family, your friends. And basically, this is going to give you some of the information that we just talked about. Finally, we have the petition. The petition says, I support medical aid in dying in Texas. We believe that terminally ill, mentally competent adults should have the right to medication that they can use to achieve a peaceful death. If you decide that you want to sign the petition, you just have to put your name, address, and city, state, and zip code. The zip code is especially important because this will be sent to a congressman who is going to be checking that out to make sure you're in his district. The next thing is, do you want to volunteer? If you don't want to volunteer, just put no, and you can stop right there. If you decide that you would like to help us out, please put yes, and then go on down and give us your email and your phone number. And then go to Compassion and Choices at the national level at their website and become a volunteer, and they will then refer you to us, and we will incorporate you into our organization, and we really can use the help. So if this is something that strikes you as an important kind of thing to have done, then we really do encourage you to do that. Do not resuscitate means that you would direct that resuscitative measures be initiated or continued, or not be initiated and not continued for cardiopulmonary resuscitation, which is CPR, for transcutaneous cardiac pacing, defibrillation, where they shock your chest, and advanced airway management, where they put a tube down into your lungs, and then with artificial ventilation, a breathing machine. Let me say that in spite of what you see on TV, there are very few successful resuscitations. They're really minimal. The other thing I would say is that of those who are resuscitated, you don't necessarily come out just like you went in. Oftentimes people have significant neurological deficits. They can't think the same. They can't function as they did before. And so the neurological consequences of resuscitation are truly significant, and that's probably the thing that keeps people from getting out of the hospital if they do survive CPR more than anything else. The first document that you have in your chart is actually the one that's the most complicated, but we'll go through it, and it's really simpler than it seems. This is called the Out of Hospital Do Not Resuscitate Order. This is if you live in a facility or you live at home and you're terminally ill, or you have an irreversible disorder such as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease, and you do not wish to be resuscitated. What frequently happens is if you're in a facility and you fall out of bed and suddenly don't have a heartbeat, then what's going to happen? They're going to start CPR and they're going to call the EMS. If you have this listed in your papers, then that should not happen. I will tell you, however, that in the melee that subsequently occurs after EMS is called or 911 is called or CPR is started, this is frequently lost, left out, or forgotten. So there is a wonderful solution to this, and that is you can get a necklace or a bracelet that says stop, do not start CPR, or stop DNR. And that's something that the EMS or someone in a facility is going to notice when they get ready to start treatment on you. If someone has been called, if 911 has been called and measures have been started, then they can stop when they see this. To fill this out, we're going to start at the very, very top where it says A, and you're going to put in your full legal name. And what I would encourage you to do, since you're not going to be able to get through all of this while we're talking about it, is do something like fill in your full legal name and then stop there as we talk about it. And then when we go down to the next place, fill in one portion of it, and then you'll be able to come back to it at the end. So you'll know where we need to go back and fill things out. But you put in your full legal name, your date of birth, your signature, the date, and then your printed name. Now don't ask me why they ask you to do a full legal name and a printed name. I didn't make up the forms, but that's what we need to do. So maybe start out by just putting your name up in that block, and you'll know that you have to come back there to complete that. The next place where you need to go is about halfway down the page where it says 2 witnesses. This can be signed by 2 witnesses and it is legal, or you can take it to a notary and get it notarized. So while you're here today, I would really encourage you to stop. Doesn't have to be a witness you know. You can turn to the person next to you that you've never met before and they can witness your document. So I would suggest that you try to get those 2 witnesses today and get this taken care of. The thing about the witnesses is this: they cannot be related to you by blood or marriage. They cannot be entitled to your estate or to any portion of your estate. They cannot be your attending physician or an employee of your attending physician. So that's all the better that you get it signed while you're here, because most of these people you're not going to be related to, nor are you going to be entitled to their estate. So Just below that, where it says the two witnesses, you come down here and there is a doctor's statement. And what you have to do with this after you get it finished is you do have to take it to your doctor. He has to sign it, and he has to make a note in your medical chart about the out-of-hospital do not resuscitate order. So that's really important, and it's important for him because he can get sued if this is not appropriately taken care of. And then finally at the bottom, for reasons I don't understand, everyone has to re-sign this. You have to re-sign it, your witnesses have to re-sign it, and your doctor has to re-sign it. So you just do that when you're asking your witnesses, please sign here, please sign here. Same thing with your doctor, please sign here, please sign here. So then you've got the whole thing taken care of. So just put little check marks next to these little areas that you have to fill out, and we'll come back and do that once we've completed all of these documents. The next form is the medical power of attorney form. And it looks thick and ominous, but what I'm going to have you do, if you would, is take this at the very, very bottom. It will give you the number of the page, 1 of 8. I want you to turn over to page 6 of 8. So on page 6 of 8, it's going to say medical power of attorney form, designation of healthcare agent. At the very top, you're going to put your name. I suggest you go ahead and do that right now so you'll know you have to come back and finish filling this part out. Followed by that will be the name of your medical power of attorney. You need to think carefully about who you want to be your medical power of attorney. You may or may not want your spouse to be your medical power of attorney. Sometimes it's hard for a spouse to make decisions about their loved ones, their most loved ones, medical care. So it might be better to have a child or a close friend be your medical power of attorney. On the other hand, it will be easy to find if your spouse or partner is around. They're usually easy to find in terms of being the medical power of attorney. So just think hard about who you want that to be. Then you're going to come down here to where it says alternate agent. It's about halfway down. Can you see where we're talking about? Okay, you can name 2 alternate agents. I suggest you name 1. The only reason I suggest that is because if your medical power of attorney is out of the country or is indisposed, then you've got someone else still to make medical decisions for you if you are not capable of making those decisions. All of these decisions will be made by you as long as you are capable of doing that. So this is just in case you are unconscious or unable to make those decisions for one reason or another. At the bottom, following alternate agents, this suggests that you list the following individuals or institutions that have signed copies of this document. And certainly you would hopefully make copies of this. I would suggest you give one of them to your medical power of attorney, okay? They need to know that they're your medical power of attorney. You need to sit down and talk to them about what you really want should the problem come up and you have to have them making your medical choices. The other one might be a relative, so that when they're called in, they can say, oh yeah, I've got that in my files. Now, I want you to go down on page 7, down to just about right here where it says or, and it is going to talk about 2 witnesses. And you start out and you sign this stating that you are appointing a medical power of attorney, and you witness who you've decided is going to be your medical power of attorney, and you print your name. Then you turn the page, and easily enough, here are your 2 witnesses. They have to put in their name and address and the date, and that's it. So it should be real easy while you're here to get this done. So that makes the medical power of attorney pretty easy. The final document is the Directive to Physicians and Family. If you'll simply go down here, halfway down the page, you start out by putting in your name. This basically states that if in the judgment of your physician you are suffering from a terminal medical condition and are not expected to live more than 6 months, even with life-sustaining treatment, according to prevailing standards of medical care, you would either request complete resuscitation or you would request that you do not be resuscitated. So all you have to do is check one of those or the other. And this is if you have a incurable illness with less than 6 months to live. Okay? You'll turn the page to this page right here, the second page, 7 of 8, I think it is. No. What they do is they give you two things. One of them is if you have a terminal illness with less than 6 months to live. The next one is if you have an irreversible illness and you do not want to be resuscitated. The case there would be if you have Alzheimer's disease and you decide you do not want to be resuscitated, you may or may not have 6 months left to live. That can be very difficult to tell in Alzheimer's, which can last as long as 10 years. The same thing's true with something such as Parkinson's disease. But maybe if you've got Parkinson's disease and you're in a car accident, you might not want to be resuscitated. So on the other hand, you may. So certainly check whichever one of those two you want. So that, again, you've got a check in one spot or the other. Then we skip the rest of that page because we're going to come back to it. And you go over here, you sign and date this, and then you have 2 witnesses. Now, the reason I wanted to come back to the other is under the last page, there's definitions, and there's something called explanation. The explanation talks about the fact that there are many life-sustaining treatments that you may or may not wish to consider. There's kidney dialysis, there's breathing machines, there's artificial life support, there's artificial hydration and nutrition. So when you come back over to the page here, it says that you can give specific additional requests. And you may want to say, I do not want nutrition, antibiotics, blood transfusions, kidney dialysis, etc. And that's a special note to your doctor to know, for them to know how much they should do aside from just not resuscitating you if you become significantly ill and are likely to die within 6 months. Not only do you not want them to resuscitate you, you may not want them to put you on kidney dialysis. You may not want them to put you on a breathing machine, even if you have not completely gone into cardiac arrest. So this is something that you can come back to and consider. And so that's it for the particular documents. Now, we will be happy to help you when this is over with in terms of where do I sign, what do I have to do here, and we encourage you to stay and get this done, because if you take it home, there's a real tendency, I do it all the time, I set whatever it is I just got through doing on the kitchen island, and I go off, and a week later I'm going through stuff trying to get everything cleaned up, and here sits the thing I was going to get done. So I really would encourage you to stay around and have everybody help you out with your witnesses. So let's summarize things for just a minute. We talked about compassion and choices, and we talked about medical aid in dying. We talked about what the safeguards were in terms of medical aid in dying. And we've asked you to consider signing the petition that was in your packet And if you want to volunteer, please say yes and fill in your email and phone number. And then we've got the 3 documents that we went over. The out-of-hospital do not resuscitate order, which is probably the one that seems most complicated, whereas it's really not. The second one, which is the medical power of attorney. And then finally, the directive to physicians or the advanced directive, the living will. It goes by a number of names.